Alright, so picture a city at night. Traffic in the distance, footsteps, the hum of life going on as usual, and then a scream. Not a kind that blends into laughter, not noise, not chaos. A scream that means fear. A scream that means someone is trapped and needs help. Psychology tells us something really unsettling about moments like this. Decades of research suggest that when people hear cries for help, especially in crowded places, they often hesitate. They wait. They look around. They tell themselves someone else is going to act. Someone else is going to do something. Now, this is called the bystander effect. The more people present when someone is in distress, the less likely it is that anyone is going to help. Responsibility at this instance is going to spread things. Fear will creep in and then doubt takes over. And sometimes those seconds of hesitation can cost lives. But every once in a while, someone listens. In 1999, beneath a bridge in Lagos, Nigeria, a woman was crying out for help. She was hidden from sight. She was weak and barely alive. Now, her voice could have just disappeared into the noise of the city. It could have been ignored, explained away. But it wasn't. Her screams were heard. And because they were heard, because someone acted when they heard her scream, the world was exposed to the crimes of a serial killer who was operating in plain sight. A man responsible for horrific acts that might have continued undetected and uninterrupted if that woman had not been rescued. The woman who screamed for help, she survived. And in surviving, she revealed a hidden crime scene that stopped a killer and shocked an entire nation. Now, true crime stories would often focus on the offender, on the darkness, on the monster. But in today's case, I will begin somewhere else, with a scream. With a moment where psychology says people freeze, but reality proves that sometimes someone moves. Now, this is a story about evil, but it is also a story about what happens when a cry for help is not ignored. This is the case of Clifford Orji. Welcome to the Red Splash, where we explore some of Africa's most chilling crime stories and mysteries. Today, we will take a deep dive into one of the first ever recorded cannibalism cases in Nigerian history. Now, let me make this few disclaimers. There are mentions of assault, decapitation, cannibalism, so please do prioritize your well-being and take care of yourself. Now, today's case is also a situation where parts have been questioned, like why the killer had not been tried after apprehension, which has left a vast chunk of the case unknown. And with most cases that have parts being unknown, there are lots of unanswered questions which people will want to know the answers to, but unfortunately no one to give those answers, especially since the case happened in 1999. It's difficult to have answers to the many questions surrounding it. Now, that opens the page for online controversies. I love them. People share their opinions, which turns into their personal beliefs or theories about the case. There isn't much discourse about the case online though, but we'll take a look at the few that has been shared. Also note that under the Nigerian and international laws, Clifford Orji, we just call him OG, was not convicted by a competent court and that he remains legally presumed innocent. Everything we know about this case is what has been reported in the media and also by the police. Now, I have done my best to pile and aggregate what has been said online and even a few online theories, like I mentioned earlier, and opinions of those who have heard about the case. So stay with me through this very short episode, and then you can come to your own personal conclusion about this case. Now, with that said, if you're ready, let's begin. Cannibalism is one of the most disturbing words in human language, the act of one human consuming another. Across cultures and across centuries, cannibalism has existed on the edge of human history. It has been feared, ritualized, misunderstood, and then in modern times, criminalized. It provokes a deep visceral reaction because it violates one of our most fundamental moral boundaries. Anthropologists and historians will generally identify three broad forms. First, survival cannibalism. Now, these acts were committed during extreme famine, war, or disaster when people will consume the dead to stay alive. History has recorded quite a few of this during shipwrecks, during sieges, and also natural catastrophes. Second is ritual or cultural cannibalism, which was practiced in some Asian societies where consuming parts of the dead was believed to transfer strength or power or, spiritual essence. And then the third, criminal or pathological cannibalism. Now, this is the form that terrifies us the most. It is not driven by survival. It is not rooted in tradition, but then linked to pure violence, murder, control, and worse, psychological disorder. But in the modern world, cannibalism is almost universally condemned and illegal. When it appears today, it is most often uncovered through criminal investigations, usually connected to serial violence. And that brings us to Nigeria, to the year 1999. The case of Orji shook the nation not just because of murder, but because of what investigators found afterward. Under a bridge in Lagos, police discovered human remains, skulls, body parts, evidence that suggested ritualistic killings and cannibalism. This was not survival, neither was this tradition. This was criminal cannibalism. Now, what makes this case especially chilling is that it remained hidden for so long. It wasn't uncovered by advanced forensic work or surveillance. Now, criminologists have also noted that in cases like this, cannibalism often functions as an extension of power. It is about domination, dehumanization, and control. The victim is not just killed, but then consumed and, in fact, erased. Now, that raises a question of who Clifford Orji was. We could say that before the crimes, before the headlines, there was a boy. Everyone goes from being a child to adults eventually. Orji was born in Nigeria, but very little is publicly known about his early childhood. And that silence, that lack of detail is part of what makes his story very unsettling. What is known is that Orji grew up in the margins. By adulthood, he was living as a vagrant, a wanderer in Lagos, surviving under a bridge along the Oshodi-Apapa Expressway. He had no stable home and reportedly feigned mental illness. There's also no documented education, no clear family support system in public records. Just nothing. Journalistic sources note that he once sold razor blades on the streets and also later called himself a native doctor. Now, in Orji's case, there were no early warning stories preserved for history. There were no interviews, no childhood anecdotes that explain what he would become. Just absence. And sometimes in true crime stories, it's that absence of care, of intervention, of visibility that allows something monstrous to grow in plain sight. Orji was arrested on February 3rd of 1999 after a woman he had kidnapped screamed for help and was rescued. The police found fresh and cooked human body parts and skulls in his shelter. He was arraigned at a magistrate court in Ebute Metta, Lagos. However, his case never reached a full criminal trial. He spent many years in custody without being convicted in court. Prison authorities later reported that Orji's mental health deterred significantly, stating that he was unable to stand trial due to psychosis or mental instability. Authorities even sought treatment for him in psychiatric facilities, but apparently it was without success. After approximately 13 years in prison without trial, Orji died in August 17, 2012 from natural causes, according to an autopsy. He died while still in Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison, which is in Lagos. Now, that raises a question of whether the bodies or remains were identified. Well, there is no authoritative public record indicating that the bodies or body parts found in Orji's shelter were forensically identified or conclusively matched to missing persons. In fact, court and police records do not show any official list of identified victims released to the public. Some later accounts and discussions suggest that no formal forensic investigation or autopsy of the remains appears to have been published or made publicly available, meaning identification of victims was not completed or even shared. Now, during his arrest, the police charged Orji with kidnapping, murder, and cannibalism, and he reportedly confessed to these crimes. However, because he was never legally tried, there was no legally established or publicly documented list of victims by their names. Some later retellings and local reports mention at least one named victim, Eno, described as a trader in some accounts, but these are not from verified police or court records and cannot be independently confirmed. Now, official records also do not provide a confirmed total number of victims connected to Orji's alleged killings, body part sales, or cannibalism. In media interviews and later retellings, it is often reported based on Orji's own statements to police that he and an alleged accomplice had been consuming human flesh for years. Now, what this implies is that there was involvement in multiple killings if this had been going on for years. But then these are confessions untested at trial and not validated by independent investigation in public records either. Now, that will bring us to a few points people raised about this case. One thread asks whether the story about Orji makes any sense at all, or if it is an exaggerated story, not just about the cannibalism aspect alone, but also the political connection to the case, because it was alleged that Orji's killings were connected to political authorities and he was not in it alone. A user on Reddit also questioned many aspects of the case, like why anyone didn't witness victims and why evidence of a phone amongst other things were found, but these items were never clearly explained. Clifford Orji's case still remains a mystery, a case that never reached full trial before his passing, a case that has left more questions than answers. Truthfully, I am equally... Anyway, what do you think about this case? Let me know in the comment section. If there's also anything that I missed, you can leave it in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching this very short episode on Clifford Orji. Stay safe, and then I'll see you in the next episode.